Hi, I'm not hearing you. Are you hearing me? Oh, now I hear you. No, I hear Steven. I don't hear Jamie. Jamie, you still in Cabo?
Hey, Steven.
Wherever you were. Steven, do you hear me? Do you guys hear me?
Yep, I do. And I also
Yeah, we
heard
can hear you now.
Jamie
You were
just now.
connecting to audio.
Okay. Yeah, okay, we're all heard.
Isn't that the only thing anyone ever really wants? Tim, are you leading the meeting today?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, actually, yes, definitely. Most certainly. No doubt about it.
All right, excellent.
But we'll wait a little bit for people to show up. What I did was I did take like 5 minutes today. Hello, Marc-Antoine.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Jamie.
I took 5 minutes today. We ended last week with kind of a decision on my part that we needed to back out of. Oh, that's interesting. Blur on your background there, Marc.
Basic zoom filter.
It looks like the portrait effect on my camera. Anyway, so yeah, we were going down lots of complex paths, and I realized they're all kind of started thinking about this as a layered onion of I was calling them scopes or calling them domains or whatever. I think when we talk about the disambiguation or definitions elements, there's a whole part of the system dealing with getting that right. But I agree they in fact should be part of the base model. Like I don't see a point in having an argumentation system that doesn't support all that, but it's a level of complexity that I think we're not ready to fully get into on the bottom up side. And there's some other things. Yeah, we were tackling harder problems, and I think we neglected to do some of the basics, is what I'm trying to say here. So I took some time to think about some of the basics that we hadn't gotten around to yet, that I might want to tackle today. So you can see it on the spreadsheet if you want to open the spreadsheet.
Where would it be on the spreadsheet?
Maybe the last
syllogism.
Ones, yeah.
Okay. Multi-premise, yes. Reusability of premise and multi-premise, yes.
Yeah, I tried to break down into some cases or examples, different versions of multi-premise. But one of the problems that we're definitely running into is the so that issue. We don't have a so that really for this stage. And I know that some of the so that's for how I would model these things are so that, for example, scoring works the way I see it needing to work. But I'm still trying to tease out some of the basic structural issues while that's still possible. So I hope that these examples kind of did that, but I know we'll come up with some so that's in the trade-offs of the modeling. But thought that might be a good place to start.
I'm fine with working on multi-premise. There's no question on my side that it's needed. So yeah, let's go.
Do you want to share the
Sure.
spreadsheet?
Yeah. Should I make it a bit smaller? No, it's not time to have 20 notification, idiot. A bit smaller. And should I last I had this stuff was, I had proposed distinction and support. I guess I should remove that. What do you think?
Yes, I think that was a bit premature. You added it
No,
as
that
a,
was just wanted to show what it could
exactly.
look like.
Exactly. You added as to explain, not as like this is what it is.
Exact. This is what it is.
Ta-da.
Sorry, guys. Can you catch me up really quick? I had to move rooms because I was having connectivity issues. Are we addressing multi-premise claims right now in the model?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Before we do that, I'm not clear, Tim, whether you reference to the so that. Do you want to discuss the so that of multi-premise or not?
I think it'll come up. It's not in the process right now. In other words, it's a messy concept for me right now of how it fits into the process, and maybe by discussing it, it will clarify some of the process.
I think the so that for multi-premise won't be hard. The so that for reuse will be the one that's going to be more interesting.
Yeah, you'll see the problem come up immediately when we talk about modeling. And let's go ahead and do the syllogism example as like one of the simplest multi-premise. I think if everybody agrees to that, we'll start with 51, and then I think you'll see what I mean. Right.
Quick clarification of terminology, which we run into issues with so frequently. Multi-premise argument versus multi-premise claim. So for multi-premise claim, what I've typically used is something like a compound claim, where there is not explicit claims that are articulated, but there is like an adjective there that if extricated from the claim itself would actually be an additional claim. So like the blue sky was terrible is like a compound claim, because like the sky is terrible is one claim and the sky is blue is something that is implied and kind of compound in that, but it's not extricated. An argument to me is like composed of claims, so it almost implies multiple premises. But go ahead, Marc-Antoine.
Were you there when I discussed the theme and ream distinction?
I don't think so.
Okay. Something I found in linguistic a few weeks ago that I think is extremely interesting is the notion that there's the things that are the common assumptions, that's the theme, what you're talking about, and the ream is what you're introducing about the theme. So when you say the blue sky is terrible, the blue part of the claim is theme. It's something that is assumed, agreed upon, or distinct there, blah, blah. Maybe it's not. I mean, sometimes people introduce shared assumptions sneakily, right? But let's assume that this is not Machiavellian, and the notion that the blueness of the sky is part of the shared assumption. This is the sky we're talking about, and terrible is the ream. It's what we're bringing in that is new in the sentence. And I think that's actually a useful distinction. It's not the same as a compound. The sky is blue and terrible, which is a compound claim where both are in the ream section.
Like if you say blue sky is pretty, the blue sky is beautiful, right? You're obviously contrasting it with like a rose-colored sunset sky or a night sky, right? So it depends on, yeah.
You've forgotten about those in Brazil, but.
I'm just wondering about potential different implications for these compound claims, or I'm sorry, is it ream and theme? Or is this
theme and ream? Theme is what
ream.
We're talking about, and ream is what we're introducing you about it.
Okay, I'm just gonna like put a note in that from linguistics. But okay, thank you. I think there may be a distinction that's arising with natural language snippets, because I think that people will add those kinds of adjectives not necessarily as a qualifier or something to further characterize the specific entity that's being referenced, but actually use it as a way of implying the value of something, as if a claim were being made. And so I think like this phenomenon happens a lot in television, for example.
Both exist, yes.
I'm going to pull the brakes on this discussion now. I let it go on for a while, but we're diving down a rabbit hole that is my intention to avoid. So this is an important topic, but please post that as an example we tackle next. As in, if you want to say the blue sky is pretty or something like that, and use it to tease out something like that, it would be a good example. Yeah, but it's not important to, or it's not in the current example, which is a simpler.
But I think besides the theme and the ream thing, what Jamie was trying to introduce is the notion that there can be composition at the claim level before we even do an argument. And I think that's something.
Right, but that is something that can be an example. That's my point.
Yeah.
Go ahead and make an example. We'll tackle it. Yeah.
And what led down this rabbit hole of discussion was just a request for clarification whether we're using the terminology for a multi-premise claim or a multi-premise argument.
Well, but so that's we let the examples are really what we're talking about, is how we would model it. And we're talking about modeling it. So yeah, you can model it as a multi-premise claim, a compound claim, or you can model it as a multi-premise argument. The argument itself would be the same either way. And so the question is, how do you want to represent that in the system, which is, as we know in debate map, is done. It looks like compound claim. It's actually a compound argument.
But it's still relevant to discuss whether or not these are the same or not, and whether or not there's some type of guideline, or can we say want to use which one, or do we only want to support the one that we're talking about now? I mean, I think that's the discussion that Jamie wants to open up.
And it's relevant. These two are multi-premise, and the NNR, these are about arguments. Here we have multi-premise statement twice, and here we have multi-premise claim. I suspect all of those are multi-premise arguments. So let's be clear on what was the intended difference between multi-premise argument, statement, and claim, if any. Is that really a term you want to support, or will we go with compound claim? That's the question.
And I think those questions need to be answered with examples. That's my point.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, but is that an intended distinction, or is that just how you wrote it? That's my question to you. You wrote it.
It's just how I wrote it. It's just how I wrote it. The examples are what actually, in other words, think of at this point, the use case description, the use case name as being sort of a title, but not a prescription of what we're modeling.
Not a precise term. Okay, excellent.
The example, yeah.
So we might decide that those are multi-premise arguments, because I don't think we have multi-premise claim defined.
Well, by definition at this point in our model, a claim, an argument is a claim. So to some degree, yeah, we don't have a multi-premise claim, but we have a subclass of claim that is argument that is multi-premise.
Yes.
So that'll be interesting to tease out in our model.
Yep.
Okay.
Martin, can you share the sheet so I can add some stuff to it, please?
There is, in fact, one example here that might tease it out or starts to try to tease it out. But let's just start with the syllogism here. It's our usual. Socrates is a man, all men are mortal. Together support Socrates is mortal. Now there's one approach to this in which that's already modeled here, right? Because you can create a claim that is Socrates is mortal. And then you create two more claims, Socrates is a man and all men are mortal. And you do Socrates is a man supports Socrates is mortal. And then you do all men are mortal supports the support that Socrates is a man supports Socrates is mortal. Mm-hmm. Did you all follow that?
Yep.
Okay. I think we all agree then that in that form, in that instantiation, the current model already handles this case.
But it's non-canonical because you could have done it the other way around.
Well, yeah, but that brings up the next discussion, and that's the one that I have, because this is the way I do it on Socrates. It brings up the question, can you add both forms? And right now I allow both forms, but then we need to decide is it okay if you add it the other way around and the first one we discussed or not?
Right. So I would say
If
that,
not, why not?
I mean, in terms of my understanding of claims, you could add both. And in terms of how I understand canonicality, there's no overlap. There's redundancy, but not a violation of canonicality, which is an interesting thing to consider, because what you have is by doing Socrates is a man support, Socrates is mortal. That is a support object, right? That is a type of claim. And you can already see that that is not the same claim as all men are mortal supports Socrates is mortal. That's a totally separate support entity, right? Totally separate claim of its own. And the fact that all men are mortal supports Socrates is a man supports Socrates is mortal is also a distinct claim,
no, but
right?
It is a breach of canonicality in the sense that the end expression is modeled in two distinct ways.
Correct.
Assuming that is the, I mean, yes, they're tightly interlinked, but the assumption when you say that is that it does go both ways, this relation. The question is,
that's my assumption. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm saying
because it's a syllogism, right?
The end. I'm saying the end expression is an expression in its own right and can be modeled both ways. I mean, you can replace it by the two-step expressions, which are not equivalent to the one-step expression.
What are two-step expressions?
The
one I said, yeah.
The Tim's constructions or your constructions, doing it in 2 steps, 2 layers, and there's 2 distinct two-step expressions. I'm arguing that those are not equivalent to the conjunction.
No, I don't think they are equivalent. I think they're actually a more atomic form of the conjunction. I played around a lot with this because I'm still deciding whether or not I want to introduce conjunctions in the first place. My main reason for not doing so is UX, really, because it complicates user interactions. It's a new concept they need to learn. But yes, of course, it is a conjunction is something different. I think we can all agree on that. But what I'm playing around with is, can you infer conjunctions from these more basic building blocks that Timothy just summarized right now? Like if you add both forms and one supports the other and vice versa, can you derive a conjunction from that? That's what I'm toying around with. So people can contribute with much more tinier building blocks, and conjunctions can actually be inferred from those smaller building blocks.
So how do you differentiate? And this is one thing that has been important to my thinking on this and the meaning of what is multi-premise versus what isn't. I approached this not from standard logic, right? I didn't know what a syllogism was, but rather just considering relevance, right? And I know that's also a hot topic for us, but we all agree that, for example, some arguments are more effective than others, right? And that measure of effectiveness is what I consider relevance. So when a support, normally what we consider is that an argument that supports another argument is meant to essentially increase its understanding of effectiveness, right? Or support its effectiveness. And if you invalidate that support, it has no impact on the support of the other one. The same thing, whereas, you know, any argument that supports something and is totally unsound or invalid doesn't undermine the thing it was supporting. It just should have no effect, right? If you say something that's false, it doesn't validate the thing invalidate something you're trying to prove. It just didn't help at all. Is everybody following me on that?
Yeah, and it's
now
awesome because it's ideal.
Yeah, and so, but then what we have here is a problem where Socrates is a man, supports Socrates is mortal, is supported by all men are mortal. That's not the case, because if you invalidate all men are mortal, you have not only invalidated its support of your argument, you have essentially invalidated, well, I don't know if that's true now.
The whole thing is there's two meanings of support and they're conflated and it leads to confusion, right? You have one meaning which is more in the sense of makes it more likely that this is true, and or it's a reason to believe. So that's one meaning. And well, actually that's two different meanings, frankly. And there's another necessary condition for, which is totally distinct and follows an entirely different logic. Like if something that increases the likelihood is invalidated, you have not invalidated the first part of the link at the first level. But if it's a necessary condition, you pretty much have.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I was assuming in this example that it does that, and when I thought about it, it doesn't really, because Socrates is a man, supports Socrates is mortal. You support it with all men are mortal, and if you prove that there are some immortal men, it doesn't invalidate the support, because you could still support it with Socrates as a man,
and most men are
Socrates is mortal, and support it with most men are mortal. Therefore, you've increased your belief in the final outcome.
Socrates is mortal.
Just because the argumentation, which puts together these claims to establish the reasoning to justify the conclusion, is not valid, it doesn't mean the conclusion isn't ultimately valid.
Correct.
It just has to do with how people should relate to that claim.
Yeah, but
negation
more
of
specifically,
proof is not proof of negation.
Right.
Yeah,
right,
more
exactly.
specifically, though, I'm concerned about whether or not the support becomes invalid. The claim that Socrates is a man supports Socrates is mortal is now an invalid support because not all men are mortal.
No,
right?
it's just not proven by that support.
It's not proven by that support. If you look at another example, I'm skipping examples for a second, but just to finish this thought, the multi-premise and argument, which is we are all members of the CDL, right? That's a different case because you have Tim as a member of the CDL and Stephen is a member of the CDL. And you can't again, I'm skipping ahead in examples, which I try to avoid doing. But here, if you do Tim is a member of the CDL supports, we are all members of the CDL. And then you try to do Stephen is a member of the CDL supports, Tim is a member of the CDL supports, we are all members of the CDL. That structure doesn't work. But if you invalidate that, if you find it false that Stephen is a member of the CDL, you've invalidated the whole thing. So that's a different case.
Yeah, because it's not relevant. Yeah. It cannot be modulus relevance. There's no because this is a compound claim.
Right. So, but we do get to scoring. This is kind of where I said this bleeds into scoring as a so that in the modeling, because the reason that I think we need an actual structure for multiple premises is the way the instantiation of this can affect how you calculate the scoring. And a perfect example is the fact that unless we have a solution for this, you can use the same multi-premise argument twice by doing Socrates is a man supports Socrates is mortal, and all men are mortal supports Socrates is mortal, and then support each other with each other, right? So you've doubled the arguments in favor of something without actually adding any information.
Depends how you do scoring and what you want to score, of course, because I mean
you can do score with a max and then
yeah, but there are kinds of scoring that become invalid by that structure. Yeah.
Yep.
Is it helpful at this time to show how debate map structures multi-premise arguments? Is that helpful because this is already a model that exists?
I don't think so.
I've seen it before. I think most of us have actually. Maybe Marc-Antoine hasn't.
It's okay. I can live without it.
He knows.
But
yeah,
okay.
it's multiple premises in a single argument. It's multiple premises supporting or as part of an argument.
There's a specific node that encapsulates the conclusion. So that is like for UI, Yes, it is. Yeah,
Nope.
this is why I thought you should refresh your memory. The top node is a summary conclusion of the entire argument. Underneath are all of the premises that you list that establish the reasoning, and the last node is the conclusion. Every single premise that is extricated in that logical proof has pro and con argumentations available in each one of these nodes. So if you're talking about scoring and you're talking about a way of calculating the weight of reasoning in justifying that a conclusion is likely to be true, that may be a useful model to consider. But that does require that argumentation is unpacked into like logical proofs where every single premise and the degree of fineness that you're interested in is incredibly important there. And this is where we get into compound claims, right? So if like Rosa Parks was a tired seamstress who refused to give up her seat, does it really matter that there's an implied claim that she was tired at the time? Is that something that is worthwhile to prove as a part of proving that particular statement as true or not? Like, do we just take it as a compound claim that implies a certain meaning that has no impact on the scoring? Or like at what times is it appropriate to extricate those things into their own claims? And so like, I feel like that's something that you guys are going to have to come up against with scoring, and debate map to a certain extent has modeled that a little bit.
Well, a lot of those questions come into just the structure of the argument itself that we can tease out with the examples. I've done one further down. But what I was going to say, it's kind of interesting to note that your perception of how debate map works is actually different from how it is actually modeled.
Well, we should give Venrich in here.
Well, no, I've had this discussion before, and the main point is I've seen the data model. I've worked with the data model. He models it as multi-premise arguments. If you look and you see it's like I think a blue box for the node that encapsulates everything, and a blue box means argument, and the premises are green boxes, and they don't have the relevance fields that go with them. You notice that what he has is you add the premises. And you can add arguments for against the truth part of them. And then there's one extra box, which is any relevance arguments you want to make that are attached to the blue node. So that blue encapsulating node is actually an argument. And there's nowhere in the data model that has it as a claim where you're only discussing truth or false of that claim. No. It's an argument. In our application of debate map, that blue box of course is an argument, because by our definition, an argument is a calculation of combining claims to create reasoning that justifies some conclusion. So that blue box is more of like, we input the more natural language iteration of that argument, when the technical extrication of that argument is something that is developed in the premises below. And of course, like there's, again, this is why we opt for curation as opposed to crowdsourcing. It's a little bit of a waste of time and space to include premises that aren't relevant to justifying that conclusion. So for our purposes, it's perfectly fine that there's argumentation, whether any one of the premises or AKA, claims as a part of an argument are true or not, because the relevance should be assumed, because we actually have curators that are inputting that. So I don't think we have too different of an understanding. But what that means
the reason I find all this interesting is that we started this discussion with, oh, I'd rather not have multi-premise because that's confusing to the users. Obviously, it's been done. Obviously, it does yield to some contention about how it's done underneath, but I don't know that it's confusing to the users. I mean, users have been able to master it, which I find interesting.
Yeah, but I think users that aren't educated or aren't instructed on how this thing works. I don't mean educated in general. I literally mean users that haven't been taught how the system works already have a hard time understanding the simple arguments and what's the difference between a relevance argument and a truth argument, right? That's already a big hurdle.
Well, that's because relevance, I think, is a particularly muddle-headed idea, and of course, it's hard to get across.
I don't think it's muddle-headed at all. I can easily tease out what is a.
Well, maybe you can do it easily, but I think it's hard for the user to understand when is it necessary, sufficient, blah, blah, blah. Because if all of this is put into relevance is a confused mess as far as I'm concerned.
It makes it easy to understand, Mike Antoine, if you don't have to disambiguate between all the ones you just listed and you treat all of them the same way, that makes it easier. So I mean,
I think you're just pushing confusion forward.
Well, yeah, you don't disambiguate between necessarily, etc. It's just any yes because. Can you construct your argument in the sense of because?
Yes. And I'm saying at some point you'll realize that you're not making the same argument. It did all look as a because structure, but you didn't mean the same thing. And you're just creating an opportunity for a very confused conversation.
Yeah, and you need to further formalize where needed. I don't think we disagree there.
Yeah. As a starting point, fair, and there I'm with you. But I'm just saying it's a confused thing, and it has to be distinguished later.
For example, take the syllogism which we were actually discussing. I mean, my latest thinking on that is, yes, I mean, you can model Socrates as a man, support Socrates as mortal, and all men are mortal, support Socrates as mortal. Both of these are valid. But the syllogism actually is a claim, one big, huge claim, using a compound claim of assuming that Socrates is a man and all men are mortal. It necessarily follows that Socrates is mortal. That's the full, it's modeling logic more than modeling arguments. So at that point, you can agree that, does that follow or not? You can agree with the compound claim, you can agree with the individual claims.
So that's interesting.
The compound claim is one model, right? You could also say that argument has multiple premises and not have compound claims, or have compound claims separately. That's a choice.
But
here's
because you can do both. This is one way of modeling it more specifically. You're modeling a syllogism, you're modeling logic here. Necessarily follows that is a thing you're modeling here, which is a specialization of supports.
It's
right. And you know, another case to consider here is Socrates is a man, supports Socrates is mortal. Can you support that one argument twice by Socrates is a man, supports Socrates is mortal, is supported by all men are mortal, and is also supported by most men are mortal. So you've made, those are two separate claims, all men are mortal and most men are mortal. They're two separate claims with an overlap, which is one of those set themes we've been talking about. But, you know, a lot of times you'll have these variations and one of them is considered to be true by most people. So, you know, in scoring would be the most considered true. But you have all of them. But what you have is a difference where the conjunction of Socrates is a man and most men are mortal is an argument that supports essentially based on probability, right? It's not 100% proof. Whereas Socrates is a man and all men are mortal is a logical proof, right? Is deduction. And so in that sense, they're very different. And so do we need to model that they're totally separate structures, or, you know, can we somehow infer from the scoring that one of those is an absolute proof, or do we need a structure that says this is an absolute proof? Right?
That's the question, I think.
That is a real question. Can I go a bit in depth in my latest thinking on this? It's very tentative at this point, but give me 4 minutes. I'm less and less thinking in terms of absolute truth values and absolute probabilities, because that is very counterintuitive. What I'm thinking of in terms is more relative truth value, saying this is true based on that, and that means this is believable based on belief in that. That means that if this is shaken, then that is shaken. And if this is shaken, maybe I need to go back to the premise and say, okay, which of the premise do I need to readjust? But it's more about the relationship between truth assessment. And so it's more a network of relative belief. It's relational rather than absolute ground.
This was my understanding when I wrote the white paper. That's the theory essentially that the white paper is built on, and but there was also this notion that there are some things that should compel because they're logic, right?
Yeah. No,
in other words, a
there's
logical flaw needs to. Yeah.
Some of the links are stronger than other. Yeah, some of the links are kind of absolute,
right.
and some of the links are relative.
Right.
There's weak links sometimes and strong links. By the way, there's a whole known computer science construct for dealing with this. It's called truth maintenance system, where you say this is based on this, and the negation is based. It's attacked by this, and if you start believing this defeater,
And in fact, this is an interesting counter argument to Stevens. I wouldn't call it an assertion, but Stevens' approach to, if you believe something, you believe it, and you should make people. It simplifies it for people, and you should also make them state essentially which one they believe and move on from there. The binary belief, not belief approach to scoring.
Well, I believe in 3 now. Binary, believe, non-belief, it depends. That's what I do nowadays.
Right, okay. It depends. Well, it depends is, in other words, I haven't decided yet. What is it depend? Oh, it depends this is too general a statement.
I have reasons to believe in it in certain contexts, and I have reasons to not believe it in other contexts. It depends on the context, basically. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's something I hadn't really gone through this exercise with, and might be a solution to this problem that I was going to propose. But that's, when you have this kind of partial, when you have conflicting stated beliefs in this network and they add up to something that doesn't make sense to you, there are 2 approaches to that, as you said, which is reevaluate your belief in this top level result. After thinking through everything and seeing on everything, my gut instinct was wrong here, and actually I've convinced myself now that this is right. That's one approach. Another approach is, like you said, to adjust something down lower. I was too hasty in that one, and move upstream. When it's binary, it's harder to resolve that conflict. Because you may flip the switch here and you've broken something over here, essentially. And by having partial values, it might more better capture that. I think what you're essentially saying when there's it depends would be, okay, for this node, I've switched off my scoring. This is no longer calculated into.
It depends for me is a bit different. It's for me, it depends sounds like I'm distinguishing those 2 subcases, and I have reasons in this subcase, and I have reasons, negative reasons in that other subcase.
And I don't feel confident. I'm sitting on the fence. I don't feel confident making overall judge.
The
other. That's what it means.
In other words, it depends means that in order for my opinion on this thing to be useful in this other case, we need to figure out a specific expression of that.
Why were you mentioning this? Because I got you off track there. I'm sorry.
No, well, I was following up with Marc Antoine's
dependency graph.
Dependency graph.
And I'm saying the moving upstream. Okay, that is distinct. Like discovering a contradiction in your truth graph, discovering here, I have reasons to believe this and I have reasons not to believe it. What do I do? Basically, which branch do I backtrack on, right? If I have reasons to believe something and not to believe something, I need to backtrack on one of the branches. The question is which one, and this is where you get there's strategies and heuristics for saying, okay, this is the belief that I'm more iffy on and that I will recheck because I got to a contradiction. But that's distinct from the introducing a distinction, and it's distinct from I don't know, which is another case, right? It depends I see a distinction, a definite distinction, and there's, I have no clue. I don't have enough data. Those are all distinct cases.
This is a really interesting, like, human-computer interaction type system. Like, is this something that's incorporated into CDL where people can interact with the data and toggle things on and off in order to have some sort of mirror reflection of their beliefs?
That's the idea. And not only their beliefs, you should be able to essentially either model or see somebody else's beliefs anonymously. Like one concept is, okay, well, and in fact, this should be the ideal is that this is the first encounter with the debate graph, is rather than seeing the popular score, which can create a bandwagon effect or somehow influence your own scores, to let you interact and score things and figure out how you feel. And the more it records your beliefs in other things, the more it can point out contradictions or, you know, reinforce why you actually believe something. So that's the learning about yourself part of the system, is interacting with your own beliefs and seeing how everything affects everything else. And another part is learning about other people by saying, for example, you know, show me, it would essentially have to be a random or maybe an accumulated aggregation of results, but show me the belief scores of somebody who came out with the exact opposite result as me on this one, right? Show me what's, yeah.
And where did we diverge? What's the belief?
Exactly.
What's the key disagreement belief that led to that different conclusion? Yes.
Well, I mean, this type of feature would be so unbelievably tantalizing, but obviously really complex. Was this in the white paper, or is this new and emergent? And
It's in the white paper. It's in the white paper.
Really? Yeah. I forgot about this.
It's one of the reasons.
Such a long time.
It's one of the reasons I want to do binary voting, because it makes it less complex. Once you
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, you have the whole human social element, which you guys probably don't want to hear at this point because it's irrelevant to building the model, but you know, people are hypocrites and they may be perfectly fine with that. But
well,
very
yeah, but
tantalizing, and users like me would be very interested to see.
Yeah. And or you know, to see where you're being a hypocrite and deal with that, right? Try to reconcile that.
The whole the really interesting thing is when there's so-called motivated thinking, right? Where you don't believe something because the impact of believing goes against something you desire, or something that's of utilitarian interest to you, and being able to see where that happens. And a lot of the real contradictions, the interesting contradictions, is when you see these mismatch between the belief network and the desire network, which are two distinct networks. But where they clash is really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think that adds a lot to the morass of argumentation, especially in the public, is that a lot of people reason for things just as a matter of course when they don't actually believe it, and it's actually some unarticulated desire or disgust or something like that. Like, people are just creative and are able to generate reasons. Quickly getting back to the point though, Stephen and Felix, based on your experience in academia, do you think that a system like this could be something that professors might be interested in extending to their students? Because I imagine to get the ball rolling on people actually wanting to use this, it probably should be something more motivated than just people kind of discovering it on their own on the internet and participating, but as a part of like a course or a tool used to teach how people construct beliefs in order to come to conclusions. I think that it could be a viable product there.
It's also the like around 4 people have reached out to me for that exact use case. To say, can I host this in a classroom? So I do believe it's a super powerful use case. But I mean, we're not there yet.
There's no question. I've worked in educational pedagogical technology. Sorry, there's no question. Like, teachers do have these students debate all the time, and being able to somehow rank the quality of participation would be an enormous use case. It can be terrible also, but certainly being able to see, I mean, that's why one reason we're so interested in the guild scoring with Jack, and because it does have huge impact in the classroom as well.
What scoring?
Guild, you know, the guild quest where we're saying,
Oh, right.
how do we do scoring of co-construction of knowledge graph, right? If the students, I actually had a colleague teacher who built an application where basically he would give the nodes of a knowledge graph to the students and have them draw the links. And some links would have been pre-populated by the teacher. So the application could tell the student, yes, that's a link that corresponds to something the teacher identified, or that's the reverse, the converse, the opposite. So he had all these other classifications because the link types were ultra important. And then sometimes it's, no, this is not something the teacher identified, maybe true, may not be true, but it would be used for self-evaluation. It was a big hit. I mean, this product was used and in demand, and that's ages ago.
Do you remember what was it called?
It was Copilote. I can send you the manual in French.
I will use
French.
Google Translate.
No, it's PDF.
Copilot.
PDF.
PDF.
Well, then I will hire some PDF, I think.
I'll probably drop it into DeepL or something.
Yeah, it's probably possible. I'll look into it.
So
Google Lens.
Just to
Google
answer you,
Lens. Have you ever used Google Lens?
yes,
I've never
I do.
used Google Lens.
Yeah. It's in Google Translate now.
You hold your phone over the PDF and it shows it in English. It like visually scans and translates on the fly.
Yeah. It's in the Google Translate app.
Yeah.
Cool.
But just to answer the question, from my experience from academia, was like all people around me it seemed like they didn't have the understanding how tools like this could be useful. It was very depressing. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right, so
Sorry,
try to get back on track a little bit for the last 15 minutes. I think maybe the next step should be, we all agree 51 is supported by the current model if you do it the way we said, right? Which is a support of a support.
Yes and no. The supports, yeah, but I think what is implied by syllogism is it necessarily follows that. And that is not support. We can model it, but we don't model it. It's implied, which is the big difference.
The distinction between the kinds of support is is missing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the question is, do we want to model that at this point, or do we just consider that we model stuff like syllogisms the way you just outlined now?
I personally would like there to be a structure to it. I don't see how you can intuit just by there being by the support structure alone. It's not enough for the system to intuit whether or not a support of a support makes a syllogism or not. You need something that says, I'm not only supporting it, but I'm creating a deduction or creating a syllogism here.
I don't even think it has to be a syllogism. The key point is that it necessarily follows that. I think pretty much all multi-premise arguments, it's assumed that, oh, well, no, maybe not. Jamie, you can speak from experience there. But I think in the most cases, when you construct multi-premise arguments, you want to do so because it necessarily follows that. Or
That's the way
be one main use
works,
case.
Yeah.
That's
how debate map works, yeah.
So maybe we could refocus this current use case with modeling, it necessarily follows that.
Okay.
Which you can also do with a single claim, right? You don't even need a compound.
Correct.
What? Sorry, I did lose the thread here, and I'm suddenly what?
But the question is, what does this use case represent? And for me, the main thing that's not supported by the model, if we want to model something more, is the specialization of supports as it necessarily follows that, which is one type of supporting.
Ah, yes.
argument schemes. Oh no, inference.
No.
schemes.
An argument scheme in the syllogism, the fact that you have two claims and they work together in the compound claim here, you could call a scheme, but it necessarily follows that is separate from that.
Yeah, I understand.
It's
a different kind of conclusion.
You're saying sufficient condition in this case, as opposed
Yes.
as opposed to more likely or more believable.
Yes, and I think it would be worthwhile to see whether we can fit that into the model. It would be interesting because we would have to like materialize.
Well, that could be a Boolean on support, right?
True. It could be as easy as that.
It could be as easy as that. Is that necessary? Not necessary, but necessarily true, or certain conclusion, absolute conclusion, or certain conclusion.
The question then is, what does that mean for relevance?
Well, first of all, if let's say we're just adding the flag. What is the term you came up with?
Conclusion proven.
Conclusion proven. Okay. Support.
Proposal.
Instead of conclusion proven, it would be proves conclusion.
I'm happy with that.
Support proves conclusion. Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
How do we structure a syllogism in this case? It would be Socrates is a man.
We can't. We're missing compounds.
Proves.
We're missing.
So in other words, you would say Socrates. Well, wait. Socrates is a man proves Socrates is mortal, and all men are mortal proves Socrates is a man proves Socrates is mortal. Does that work?
No, it doesn't, because it's not true that either alone is enough for the proof. Neither alone proves the conclusion.
What if, wait. What if Socrates is a man supports Socrates is mortal? No, that doesn't work. Okay.
It doesn't work either. You do need the compound.
Okay.
Well,
and by the way, I never, I keep saying, do we need the compound or do we need multi-premise? I prefer multi-premise myself, but that's me.
Maybe you don't need a compound.
Maybe
it simply means if the support relation isn't necessarily follows, maybe it simply means that all the supporting claims of the relevance need to be necessarily true as well.
Okay. What you're saying is, yeah, but no. So
and that there shouldn't be any opposing things.
Oh God, the semantics is obscure, because you could have.
Okay, but can we keep it simple and come up with cases later with the you could have? Because for this case, if we have premise as being a collection of premises, and we have this proves conclusion flag, that would solve 51, correct? And it would also work for any other previous supports. No,
incorrect. It doesn't solve 51 because we don't have compounds, and we just went through.
What do you mean we don't have compounds? If you could map it as a collection of premises instead of a single premise.
Yeah. If you can have a collection.
One or more.
Yeah. If you have one or more premise and proves conclusion, yes, we're fine. I'm perfectly happy.
So let's do that here and then see if we can find a case that requires something different, like a compound. Do people agree with that? Just so we can mark this done and move on to the next case, which adds more elements. Yes? Okay, mark it done. But you need to change the model now that premise is one or more.
I did here. Oh, I didn't do it here though. You're right.
Yeah, you didn't do it on the, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, just raises questions about canonicality, right? Like how do you meta discussions, like how do you add an extra premise, etc. That's my problem with this. Not necessarily a problem. I mean,
yeah, but we're still kind of considering the ideal mapping world, right? Person did it right the first time. Okay, so 52, I think I would say would be a good next step.
No, 52 is perfectly handled in the same way. It's 53 that'll cause problems. We can, as far as I'm concerned,
Okay,
52 is complete.
Anybody disagree with that or have questions about 52?
Sorry, can
It's
we
not a
repeat,
syllogism.
because I didn't get the last sentence. My connection was.
So 52 is not a syllogism. Instead, it's essentially several conditions like an and statement that all must be true in order for the conclusion to be true, right? And I mean, it brings up some interesting things, which is, the question of, it makes it debatable whether or not this proves a conclusion, right? Because if we have the collection of premises, but we're missing one of the members, or, we add an extra member who is not, well, if we add an extra member who is not, and that person is, that would invalidate the premises. So that's okay.
I mean, the example is a bit weird because you would never say we are all members. I mean, what does we
Yeah,
refer
I also
to?
find it a
It's
bit
a cyclical
hard to
argument. If you then add a definition for we, then it doesn't work.
Right, but that's a question of definitions, and that is something we've touched on but haven't fleshed out yet. I kind of want to leave it for later.
No, it's not.
But
just the we is indexical. I mean, it carries no meaning. You cannot say we are all members of.
Right, you'd have a definition for we that is a list of people, for example.
Yeah, but even if you assume you'll add a definition, the definition you're going to add is the list that it's cyclical. It doesn't make any sense.
It's not cyclical. Because
the definition with the we are Tim, Stephen, Mark Antoine, Bentley, blah, 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 dot, dot, dot.
Yeah, it's not cyclical. It ends the debate about whether or not the collection of premises is the correct set of premises, right?
Stephen, think a bit.
Because
I suggest it's simply let's call the conclusion instead. There are over 3 members at CDL.
There's at least
no, we can do it. Yeah, I mean, if we made it, Tim and Stephen, if the claim is Tim and Stephen are members of the CDL, right, is the claim,
but
then you would create a support that has 2 claims. Tim is a member of the CDL and Stephen is a member of the CDL.
But it is a bit tautological. So I think that Stephen's idea to punt the discussion with CDL has at least 3 members.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We're just avoiding.
So talk about it.
I got it. Okay. Yeah.
And then can I set it as completed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Good. Multi-premise OR argument. Now this one is interesting because what you would do is have 2 claims. Like if you go with disjunctive normal form, each forms a conjunction, each form and multiple claims form an implicit conjunction. Now, however, what is interesting is each claim is sufficient. So each one proves conclusion separately, and one of them is true. I think we're fine.
Mm-hmm. You just add 2 supports that both prove conclusion, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so what I'll need to do is add an example that is an exclusive OR. Yes, you're correct. Multiple arguments are implicitly ORs, right? But if every argument you add, if every argument that is proves conclusion, that collection is essentially an OR relation. Yes, yep. Interesting.
But if you have a Or if you want an XOR, what you do is reduce it to disjunctive normal form.
That's
and
what I
then
was
the
going to do
ORs,
next. Yeah. Yeah.
This is where formal logic is actually useful. It doesn't happen that often, but this is what it's made for.
Oh, right. Yeah. It was the easy stuff at some point. Yeah.
Yep.
So we should put that as an example. If you want to tackle it, we can tackle it. If not, don't. But the question for XOR is there a more efficient way to model it than doing the
Then disjunctive normal form.
yeah. Well, let's not tackle that yet. I'll say let's tackle that a little bit later. I'll add it as another example. But I think reusability. Well, in the example I have here, it's not such a good case because of the previous outcome. But go ahead.
Reusability is implicit. Go.
So I'm just, our data hierarchy is very different in society library, right? We have positions. We would essentially take arguments like these and unpack them and find how arguments are pointing towards the same position and then enlist those arguments as support of the position. And I'm trying to think of a real world example of this concept that isn't a false dilemma. And that just makes me question, are you guys trying to, is that just going to be called out in the argumentation? If something is logically fallacious, so it's not necessarily that the conclusion is wrong, but it's like a technically fallacious way of constructing reasoning. Are you guys just going to let that emerge by the argumentation of other users, or is this something that you're trying to model against in order to encourage good modeling of good argumentation?
That's a good question. It comes down to how do you question what is already modeled, basically. Is it part of this model or is it part of the meta model? That is, I think it's probably what we need to discuss indeed at this point.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
I personally
both.
want to model it.
Yeah, it's both. We're already essentially by having a proves conclusion, we're doing something like that, where you could create a support and say it proves conclusion and it doesn't actually prove anything. And yet we do want to capture those structures for the times it really does.
What we would do is support the negation of the proof's conclusion. Because we do have negation, right?
Yeah, simply put, you'd oppose the support of the proving, right?
Yeah, you oppose the support.
Yeah.
Or you support the negation of the support, which is how we do it in this model.
Okay.
So I think, yes, it is a goal for me. I think it is a goal. I'm not sure if it's a goal for all of us, but speaking for myself, being able to have an incorrect reasoning under discussion and modeled as such is a goal.
Yes.
Okay.
And not clear. It's the same for
yeah.
Steven and Felix have
I'm just continuing to think what it means. I think whether or not the support is a proof's conclusion, the underlying argumentation of the relevance carries different semantics and carries a different weights. I don't know exactly how, but that's what I'm currently thinking about.
Okay, so let's say that this is something we're not yet agreeing on, which I'm fine with.
No, I think we need to find examples. We need to see how we would model things and how would you resolve disagreements with things that are modeled.
I think, Jamie, you bringing in real life fallacious arguments and let's see, do we want to model this and how do can we model this and do we want to is probably the next step. Bring in an example.
I think so.
Yeah, put them in the spreadsheet here so we can tackle them.
Okay.
We're even 4 minutes past the hour. I have a lot of work to do, but I don't have a hard stop today.
Same.
Do
I
you
have a
wanna
hard
try
stop
to-
at the I have a hard stop at the half hour, but I'm okay ending now in 10 minutes, and half hour would be a nice cutting
Yeah,
point.
I think I would leave now and continue to work, but you guys can stay. The recording is continuing.
Not sure it can continue without you. Oh,
I
you
think
can
it
make
does.
us host.
It's a cloud recording.
Yeah,
now.
we could. It's
Oh, good.
So I'll try, else please let me know and I'll start again or something. Okay. See you.
Bye, Felix. Also, another point of clarification. There was discussion, actually, Felix, you were around for it, whether or not the Society Library should represent its data hierarchy. Stephen, I think you, Felix, and I had that conversation. Did I miss that day? Like thinking it was a
No.
different day?
No,
Okay,
it
or
got
did we just
skipped.
run right over it because we were busy
No,
with other things?
that's one thing I do think a demo is still useful. It's more like it's the position thing you mentioned earlier as well.
Right. Yeah,
I'd love to see a demo of that again. I mean, I have it in my head, but I think for
I'm back. You mentioned me, Jamie.
I did mention it, yeah. So last week I thought I was going to be presenting the data hierarchy because we had a conversation about, it was useful to some concept being discussed, and I just wanted to ask, like, did I forget that day, show up on the wrong day, or did we just run right over it? So I just wanted, for my own sake of integrity, did I fuck up, or did we just like forget?
Did we fuck up collectively?
Yeah.
Fucked up collectively, it sounds like, which is good because I feel better now. But
Well, I don't remember it being
Was it
scheduled for
Friday?
today. It wouldn't have been
No,
today
no,
because this is the
it wasn't
bottom
scheduled
of
for
the
today.
day.
Oh.
Yeah, it
What
was.
was it? I actually don't remember it.
I don't remember it being scheduled at all. So I
Yeah.
at least
I think it was a meeting that
probably
went
fucked up.
overtime and was simply a suggestion to bring it up because it was highly relevant to something we discussed in that meeting.
Right.
But for the life of me, I can't remember the topic of that meeting.
Luckily, it wasn't, our conversation wasn't recorded. Well, anyway, you guys know I'm here, and we've created our own little data structure, and we've done it from, working with data in the wild, so to speak. So like dealing with like the actual nature of how people argue online already and building a structure to accommodate that. So if that's of interest, I'll keep nudging you guys and bringing that up.
I'm all for it.
Cool.
Yeah, we
But
can even use
let's-
my time tomorrow if you like, Jamie.
Let me check my calendar. Tomorrow the
Same
7th,
bet time, same bet channel.
9 a.m. my time. Okay, yeah. I have you guys
9 or
scheduled,
8?
so
Isn't
yeah.
it 8? your time?
Oh, I remember. It had to do with a specific and abstract, like the hierarchy of, because the way Jamie does it right now, they have these categories and then they have more specific interpretations.
Yes.
To see a real life example of that, I think would be super useful to, if we ever pick that conversation up again.
I've been thinking a lot about specific and abstract. I've got things to say about that eventually.
So I'd say, Jamie, tomorrow is yours. I hand it over to you.
Okay, so tomorrow's the day. Sounds good. I will take it.
But
Great.
by the way, 11 my time should be 8 your time, not 9.
I'm still in Mexico, so maybe I'm in a different.
Oh, you're in
time zone.
Mexico. That's why. Okay, sorry.
But
Okay.
yeah. And I'll still be in Mexico tomorrow, so.
And I found that I'm living at UTC time here right now on the Azores. Yeah,
Excellent.
which is strange to have UTC as local time, but yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna leave again. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, ciao, ciao.
See you.
Folks, it is a natural breaking point. I don't know how you all feel, but
Yeah.
Yeah, plenty to do.
Find an example of what the current model that we can break, and then tomorrow I think we have a nice schedule.
yes.
Cool.
See you
I'll
guys
see you
tomorrow.
guys tomorrow.
See
Bye,
you.
Demain.